Hey YouTube, welcome back to the console room. It is the week of December 20th, and we are back with another episode of our weekly jump reviews. We're going to be looking at My Hero Academia, chapter 295. So, quick little summary. We had the reveal last week of Mr. Compress being, kind of like the family lineage of kind of like one of the Robin Hoods of the world in the vein of Gentle Criminal. We, in this chapter, see that kind of taken a little further. We get introduced to another one of Midoriya's quirks, which is very interesting. And I think arguably the biggest kind of instance of this chapter is who's back, but all for one. He kind of dominates Shigaraki, and that was actually something that I was very surprised to see, I must say. And again, even I guess arguably more surprising is we see again this innate ability in Deku to see beyond the surface of people. And I was definitely not expecting at the end of the chapter for him to say that he felt that Shigaraki, of all people, needed saving. That was a big surprise for me. So,
I really enjoyed that part.
No, I don't disagree. We'll come back to that, but let's with the quick little summary out of the way, let's jump back to the beginning and talk about this new quirk. So, I'm so sorry. It's called Danger Sense. Get out of here. It's Spidey Sense, and you'd know it.
It's Spider Sense. We know a lot of this manga is inspired by just American comics in general. I mean, Spinner is basically a Ninja Turtle, you know what I mean? Or I guess a Lizard Turtle, or a teenage lizard, right?
Teenage Ninja Lizard.
Yeah, exactly. With other heroes too, but in his own style and in his own world. Though Danger Sense, it's crazy that because we were going to talk about it yesterday. We've seen that image before, and I thought nothing of it. You know what I mean?
No, because that's the big thing that I wanted to talk about, I guess, about this quirk is I'm going to be ballsy. Every single manga that has ever existed uses that type of alert panel. You know what I mean? Where a character goes, "Oh shit, what's going down?" There's whether it's, a killing intent or some sort of event, there's always that, "Oh shit."
Yeah, well, it's funny that you say that because I agree, but I disagree at the same time. Yes, it's kind of it's similar to a not a hard dial, but if you put it on sideways, kind of like when what's his name, Super Saiyan, what's his name, Gohan go to Super Saiyan 2 and face against Cell, and you see a similar not the streak of line, but kind of oh, he unlocked something. I don't think we have seen something like that in my opinion, yes, but we haven't seen it, I guess, directly up where it's striking his brain or striking his Deku's head, where we visually kind of oh, he's getting something. And personally, again, we saw it in the last chapter and we thought nothing of it, even though I did notice it, but I didn't thought it was what's the word?
Relevant? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Where it's funny because it wasn't relevant, but it's also okay, that was an interesting thing, and maybe that was just a visual kind of he just noticed something. But no, it's actually a visual quirk where for the readers, right? And for Deku, his character, obviously other characters can't see it. I loved it, man. I mean, yeah, Spider Sense, great. It's cool, and it's another ability that it's a passive ability. You know what I mean? Instead of something float or the Black Whip one, and obviously super strength one, right? So it's pretty cool. I really enjoyed it. It was a nice surprise, and yeah, I mean, were you not a fan of it, or were you just kind of
I'm gonna take the opposite stance a little bit, to be honest. I'm finding if there's kind of, I guess, a comic book comparison or mirror for Deku from a personality standpoint, B, somewhat development standpoint, and C, I guess, now kind of ability overlap. He's Peter Parker, but manga form, if you will, because we've got this kid who gets bullied. He's down on his luck. He is smart, and he gets a lot of things that people don't. There's definitely an underlying need to help people, but there's no ability to act on it until the power kicks in. And at first, I loved just the character overlap, like the similarities and stuff like that, and it was great. I'm like, okay, cool. I can see the Peter Parker connections for sure. But then we kind of got Black Whip, and I was like, okay, he's kind of Spider-Man esque now. And then we get Spidey Sense basically, and I'm like, okay, now we've kind of just got like Japanese Peter Parker. And I get a little torn on that. I know it's an oversimplification. I don't want to go overly crazy with the hot take, but I liked the character overlap. I like less the ability overlap, to be honest.
I could definitely see where you're coming from because it is basically he's inspired by Spider-Man and like other heroes and stuff like that. I mean, even one of the character bios, I forgot what's his name though, but the guy who has the tape in his elbows.
Sero or whatever? Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
yeah, like his like literally like if you ever read his bio, like it's like oh he likes this and he dislikes this, and also like he has like his favorite hero is like a web slinging like hero back in the United States. I'm like
Oh,
that's
so again, Spider-Man reference.
Spider-Man.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, so it's very I could definitely see, but like it's still his story to tell, and I mean a lot of things kind of copy a lot of I don't not copy, but like you
It
know
draws influences and
yeah for sure,
inspiration,
and I
yeah.
definitely get what you're saying because like Spider Sense, Black Whip, yeah, I mean for that instance for sure, I could definitely see where you're coming from, but it's just he's an amalgamation of a lot of things put together, and yeah he was bullied, he was this, but I guess to see that in I guess it's been a while since we've seen that. I don't want to say it's been a while since we've seen that in manga format because I'm pretty sure mangas you have the hero and you need to like make him grow and like grow through his trials and tribulations and relatable also because I'm pretty sure a lot of people been bullied and stuff like that.
Mhm.
So I personally don't mind it because it's a story that yeah we similar told but differently.
I can't argue with that. I think for me, it's just I wish there was maybe a little less of an preferably, because I don't know, like there's nothing wrong with a danger sense quirk, right? There's no problem with that. I just think for me again, it's just there's a little too much overlap. I think he could have gone some far. He can run really fast, but what's he gonna do with an air opponent? Okay, now he can fly. Okay, well, there's still a little bit more
Well, like
difficulty.
he needs to
He's
control it and
partly.
like sorry to like butt in here, but like even he said it himself like danger sense kind of like he can't really handle it, kind of similar like he couldn't
But
handle
that makes like no sense to me, to be honest with
well, it's
you.
probably
Like,
like a massive like super headache because like it's like sense is going off crazy, but he doesn't know where. You know what I mean?
yeah, and like okay, sorry, I understand it from that perspective, but I guess from all of the quirks, I mean, I think it makes sense to not really kick in, because a big part of his inability to use these other quirks is he doesn't know, the way it's supposed to be is that, or it's, I guess, as it's been um illustrated slash he's trying to create this idea of it's like a locking mechanism, right? And each perk is behind or each quirk is behind the lock, and he needs to pop the lock to just let it through in a very safe and usable way, right? With
Mhm.
how much he's been through and with how much more demanding all of these other quirks should be, I'm hoping it's just the circumstances and that he's kind of like on death's door, for lack of a better word, that's creating this instance. Because with how much experience Deku has at this point, this quirk, by far, in my opinion, should be like that. Like with how quickly he got float under control because of the training that he did with Uravity and stuff like that, versus this should be like open and closed in terms of how quickly he should have a grasp on it.
Yeah, well, I don't know. Yeah, he's been training with the other one, and he like you said, All Might's and also showed up, but like to I don't know to him to have in control, and yeah, he's been in a lot of fights because he's the main character and he's been in a lot of situations, but I don't know. It's kind of like it was just like a good like a surprise for me, or like the character's still growing while the battle's still happening in this like intense like fallout essentially of this whole arc.
That's a fair point. I'm kind of glad you brought that up because I feel Deku's growth at the moment is, to be honest, I too accelerated. Because so let's like rewind just a little bit in terms of let's not include the super short training arc where they went to like Endeavors for like a week and there was like, maybe
No, it
6
wasn't a week.
chapters or
I
something.
think it was like over the winter.
Was it over the whole winter break? Okay, but my point being, that whole scenario was very short, very closed. Like, it was like, okay, come train with my dad. You got a little bit of background on the Todoroki's family, and then, boom, doors closed. We're going to the bigger arc. But if you rewind just a little beyond that, what we had was the original emergence of Black Whip in the clash between the classes, right?
Yeah.
Between Class A and Class B. And that I thought was perfect. All of the scenarios kind of created this instance for this new quirk to pop out, and it was super unexpected. And I'm still totally willing to even accept float within this because All Might knew his master's quirk, right? He would have been like, oh, well, if you got that one, my master had this. So since that's arguably the one that should be popping up more quickly as it's the fresher of the quirks, if you will. Again, training with your Ravity, it popping up in this fight, totally agree, totally makes sense. This for me is a little forced because I understand you want to mirror the progression of your antagonist with your hero. So Shigaraki's kind of hitting his pinnacle almost, right? He's not quite in sync with everything. He's still, kind of getting everything figured out, but he definitely is progressing. Meanwhile, Deku was too, but it's almost like, okay, well, Shigaraki's kind of farther up, so I'm going to squeeze in another quirk to give him right here, even though if you kind of really think about it, other than him knowing, or I guess kind of sensing that One for All is about to pop up, or sorry, All for One's about to pop up, it doesn't really add anything. It's kind of just there, and that's where I I feel the growth is a little accelerated.
Ah, I don't know. I disagree. I think it's just like, I mean, just being like a reader is just like, oh man, like, or like, I guess a casual reader, or like whenever it shows like, oh, like, holy crap, like this is crazy because like he has another one, but he's not really fully prepared. I think it's just an awesome moment to me. And like I said before, it's a passive ability. It's not more of a action oriented, whereas like, oh no, he has like fire breath like his father and stuff like that, if I remember correctly, or something like that. So to show up. And yeah, I get like the acceleration, like he's growing too fast in this like instance, but like stuff is like popping off, so it's not surprising. He's and for the few chapters that we've been reading, like he's been down for the count for like for how long? So for this to come out, I think it's really no surprise. And even from like way back when he in the first tournament arc, um, we've seen the 9 heroes, so like we know eventually he'll get them. And I guess we didn't know how the process was, but again, this being a passive one, I think it's okay. I think it's okay to like show up now, especially like you know with a one what is it, All for One? Yeah, All for One showing up. It makes sense because like he still hasn't like not interacted with him, but like well he did it during this chapter, but it makes sense for it to come out when All for One showed up because what happened, going on towards the chapter with um Mr. Compress saying like, "Oh, Spinner, you're like his most loyal follower," and with stuff like that. And the funny enough, moving along through the chapter, I mentioned this last week. I really hope Spinner has like a little you know, I guess a Holy Grail save or something like that, which he did, which is kind of crazy. And it wasn't like his ability or something like that. It was just like him believing in Shigaraki.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
That's kind of nice, I guess, actually, from the standpoint, and nice is the bad is the incorrect word, but that's, I guess, a great way to also contrast this idea of like you don't actually need to have powers to have an impact, right?
Yeah.
Because his quirk didn't do anything. He didn't like do anything crazy. It was just like, hey, like, you know, belief is its own kind of power to an extent,
Yeah.
right? And that was really interesting as well. It's kind of funny because last week we're looking at Mr. Compress's reveal and stuff like that, and I'm like, man, this guy, oh, this is kind of pointless. And he gets thrown away as quickly as he gets revealed, like in the next chapter. So I'm just like, all right,
Yeah.
more fuel for my fire. That was kind of pointless. Um, what I find very, very interesting is this is All for One popping back up again.
Yep.
That to me was very surprising. I think, to be honest, I'm okay with it personally,
I love
and
it.
and yeah, so do I, to be honest, because it makes again, I'm too anal about, plot progression and things linking up and things having logical, connections, because I've tried my hand at writing and stuff like that, or like, still am, and that kind of shit. So to see that, like, that for me is like the perfect cop out, where he's in prison like 100 kilometers away, but due to the way the quirk works and all this type of stuff, he shows up and has this huge impact that is actually going to be the reason that this fight now, I'm going to say, completely goes back to the side of the villains, and it's just done at this point. The heroes aren't coming back from this, in my opinion. This is done, especially when you look at that last image, but we'll get to that. So I love it. I think it was fantastic, and it it goes further to solidify Deku's quote at the end of the end of the issue, and oh man, it just goes to show how powerful this guy is,
I
where
mean,
he keeps popping up.
and we mentioned before, like, and you probably, I don't know if you remember, aside from like Spinner coming up with a, like saving Shigaraki, so that, quote unquote, right? Not really saving him, but like, you know, getting out of the situation that they're in. We mentioned this before, where like, how One for All is more like an inherent, like everyone, goes into like this one person, right? It go, bounces from one person to one person to one person, but it's like a spirit, and your quirk transfers, right? And it's like a latent ability or whatever. Where One for All, I mean All for One, sorry, the villain, um, it's literally just for him. Like he's like, oh, I could do that too, but this is just for me. I'm transferring my consciousness to this, to that, and that's why I can do all that. So it's very much. I mean, aside from the name being the exact opposite, their abilities are basically very the opposite too. When it comes to like 10 people in one person, nah, I'm gonna go one person and 10 people, so to speak. And it's funny because he mentions that, like, he's more conscious and he takes hold in his like symbiotic relationship, and he gives me a very much Venom vibe, more of that
Hmm.
Spider-Man motif when you see in that panel on page, I think, what is it, 10, and you see like the black veins and everything. It's like, oh, that's very Venom-esque for sure.
I agree, and you're definitely right about the contrast for sure. Where it's this whole idea of, it's like the community of heroes coming together to, improve a person and lift them up and let them be more than they can be. Where again, All for One's kind of the opposite, right? He's trying to drag Shigaraki down. He's trying to like take over his body. So yeah, there's definitely this idea of, uh, you know, it's honestly, it's just kind of, I guess, it's because the whole framing of both of these quirks is the Musketeers, right? Like All for One and One for All kind of thing. Um, but for him, it's like almost beyond that. There is no one for all. It's literally just, you know, everything is mine. Even Shigaraki. It's like, it makes me wonder, I guess, if he's always done this, because
Yeah,
one of
I
the
think
big
it's that.
things that has come up, right, is how could he be this old? So I guess this is kind of the logical evolution of that, where any apprentice he's ever had that maybe we've never heard of has never been about them and about raising someone to take on. It's this manipulation of a person to turn them into a vessel for himself.
Yep. I mean, the name itself, all for one, oneself. So
Yeah, precisely. So it's definitely a great kind of twist again. I also find it kind of cool how there's that transformation where, I'm not sure how this works, but One for All, oh sorry, All for One doesn't have eyes. And that kind of transfers to Shigaraki. I'm not really sure what that's about, but like that, it also again just, I guess, solidifies his power and stuff like that, right?
yeah,
So
it really gives me. It's funny that you say that because, yeah, we don't see it, like, again, a transfer over where he doesn't have thing, and I'm like, why does that stay? Why can't he regenerate that? And like, and I look at the Nomus, I'm like, man, their brains are like always like they're always out there, right? So is that a relate? Because remember, he could control the Nomus, so
mhm.
it's a very interesting thing. I'm pretty sure we're gonna learn more about because there has to be I mean, visually, yeah, it's awesome and creepy and whatever, but there has to be a reason for that, and I think visually there needs to be.
I would agree. That would make a lot of sense to me as well.
Yeah, because like I'm looking at some of the Nomus, like some of them don't even have eyes either. They just have the whole brain, or it's
Yeah,
all
or it's like one eye or just a hole. Yeah, I feel you.
yeah,
There's got to be some intentional design choices I feel
or
there.
you know what? I mean, this is like me, theorizing. Like some of them do have eyes, and they're on like the brain, whatever. Like maybe that's how All for One sees. Like he sees through the Nomus. So
Oh, that's
yeah.
not a bad idea. Okay, okay.
I mean, some of the Nomus do have their own like quote unquote personalities or whatever, right?
Or they're developing them, yeah, slowly but surely, which is
Yeah,
interesting.
but I think like again, he could control them, so he could like see through them regardless.
I'm
So
also wondering now that we're kind of just going back and forth on this, if I wonder if Nomus were actually intended as vessels originally, but it didn't
ah,
work,
yeah.
so they became disfigured as opposed to I'm assuming it would have to do, similarly to um One for All, where
Well,
it
yeah,
gets passed from person to person, but you can't handle the strength until you build up, not just your physical constitution, but like your
yeah.
mental constitution.
Well,
So
yeah. Go ahead. I don't want to go ahead.
no, no worries. And so I think it's almost the same thing for Shigaraki, right?
Yeah.
Where slash All from One, where these Nomus weren't working because they weren't able to handle it all. And then the stronger the vessel probably leads to the high end nomus that we see that have a bit of personality, and then meanwhile the ideal situation is a Shigaraki, a completely compatible vessel that can hold all of your quirks, and then you can just transfer your mind to them, because you
Mm,
obviously wouldn't want to transfer into a nomu, right? So you're always looking for the Shigarakis.
yeah. I mean, yeah, I do agree. I think I just had another kind of theory, and then it kind of left out of my brain just now, and it had to do with the Nomus, and I cannot remember it, which kind of God damn
Personality.
it.
I'm just going to spitball some terms here. Personalities, high tiers, additional vessels, failures.
Okay, there we go. That was the whole vessel thing. Okay, so you know how like usually, again, they're both complete opposite of each other, one for all for one, right? How like
Hmm.
one for all is like, like here, Deku, like, or here, All Might, I forgot what his All Might's real name.
Uh,
I forgot what it was, but like here you go, like it's like willingly compared to like the Nomus, they're like kidnap people, right? And
mm,
their personality, and
that's.
it's like, and he's forcing them, and like
Hmm.
again, similar to oh my god, Kuragiri, Kuragage, the Void,
Oh,
the guy,
Kurogiri. Yeah, yeah. I think it's
yeah, the guy that
Kurogiri.
can
Yeah,
like
yeah.
remember he was someone else, and then he became something else with a different quirk. So I'm like, you theorizing, maybe they were the vessels. I think so too. Remember, because I think they were, obviously we know they're kidnapped people and they have no recollections of their old selves. They're completely new. They're completely new, quirks. So it's very, I think it's very possible that was the situation, but maybe for some reason you can't control. You can't like go inside them or just choose not to, or there's some other third variable. But he could control them. So
That's a good point. You know, I'm wondering if maybe it's the quirk that still possesses some of the personality, because that's what we're kind of seeing in Deku's situation, right? But maybe it's an amplification due to All for One being who he is, that it becomes negative. You feel me? Whereas opposed to, the One for Alls don't try and force their wills and their consciousness into
yeah,
people. They naturally arose to help against it, versus, in his age, or sorry, on his side as All for One, he's trying to, as you mentioned, force it and stuff like that. So I think it could be a mix, and there's probably some other things, as you mentioned, some other variables that we're kind of not aware of, not necessarily not taken into consideration, but we're definitely not aware of.
that's
So, moving on, I guess, just to the kind of final part of the chapter, that I mentioned in originally, just kind of the really brief summary. The That last line, man, I love it because
oh, I love. I agree, man. It's Deku, and it's like, yeah, he would say that, and it's just I want him to do that, man. I want him to
right?
save him.
I
Yeah.
agree, and it was such a good twist, to be honest with you, because Shigaraki this whole time has been, you know, established as the perfect inheritor of All for One. I just want to see the world burn. My dad hated heroes. When my quirk activated, I accidentally killed a dog, and then everybody hates this.
Mhm.
It's this very downtrodden individual who exemplifies everything that All for One would be looking for in a vessel, right? Somebody he could manipulate, somebody who feels weak, somebody who hates other people, all these types of things. And yet, you know, Deku, as we've seen in Bakugo, as in, Kota, as in Eri, all of these main people that revolving around him, he sees this underlying need that they're crying out for help. And to see him even find that in the villain of the series, like the main antagonist, that was, to be honest, I don't think I was truly blown away by this chapter until that last spread, when those words were there. I was like, wow, you're kidding me. Like, that's unbelievable that he could see that.
I really enjoyed the chapter. It was like, like, oh man, this is getting serious. Like, I was excited with the whole spinner part. I mean, just going back to spinner, I like how like visually the panels are like shaped like a circle because they are in like the compressed circle thing until it, like, I guess, pop, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, like that all for one coming. Yeah, all for one. Yeah, they're basically the escape, and yeah, just like the inner monologue of Deku, like, and then like he couldn't reach out, and then him, Shigaraki just faded into like, the light, so to speak, right? And he couldn't do anything, and then the like destroyed city, and just that last line, like, you know, it just resonated, and it's so Midora, it's so Deku, and it's so much of a hero would do, no matter what. Yes, Shigaraki, this and that. It's just the circumstances he grew up with. You still, and yeah, even afterwards, like the terrible things he done is like he still wants to save him. You know what I mean?
Well, no,
And it,
it's also like he needs saving, right? He
Yep.
wants to be redeemed, clearly, if there's that
Yeah.
desire.
Well, like, yeah, I don't know if redeem, but it's more like he sees that Shigaraki is just struggling. I mean, similar to like how he did with Todoroki in the tournament arc. You know, he saved him in a fight.
Good
You know what
point.
I mean?
Yeah.
So to speak, even though he lost. So
I had forgotten about Todoroki. That's a good point as well. Well, the reason that I say redeemed is because if you look at All for One, he doesn't care, right? Like, he just does this, and there's no shits given.
yeah.
But if, truly bad people, they want to be redeemed. Or sorry, sorry, people who are not truly evil and have the potential, they seek redemption. And I think we saw inklings of that when we were going through the chapters where Shigaraki was kind of having his mental breakthrough that allowed him to turn his quirk up to the next level, right? During the whole Revolutionary Army versus the League of Villains thing. And with those chapters and those flashbacks and getting that insight into his character and his development, I didn't ever, I guess, to be honest, that framed him more for me as a misunderstood character than an evil one. And then it's kind of like, the Anakin Skywalker situation where you end up, being manipulated by this evil guy who makes you think that there's nothing left for you and that people will always reject you, right? Because if you mirror Eri with Shigaraki, both of them have extremely, extremely dangerous quirks. Eri was afraid of them. Why? Because Overhaul had manipulated her and, used her and made her believe that there was only like evil for her power to be used. But through Deku saving her and, the developments that she's made, she ends up saving other people. And, you know, if you actually think about it, Shigaraki would be arguably one of the best natural disaster heroes ever.
Mm.
Oh, there's lava flowing here? Decay that crap. Oh, that building's about to fall on someone? Decay that crap. He would actually be amazing as a hero with his ability. He could prevent people from dying on an unbelievable scale by just controlling what gets destroyed versus what doesn't. There's so many amazing ways for him to actually be a hero through the use of his quirk. And again, I just think it's amazing that there's this idea that even this antagonist who so far has kind of only been framed as evil especially as I was mentioning, when you look back to that revolutionary arc and his rejection of all that stuff, that there's still that need to be saved. So, this is what makes you love Deku. Wouldn't you agree?
Oh yeah.
That
I mean, for sure. Like, just Deku has a knack of like you cheer him on, and he wants to save everyone because I mean, what he's inspired. And he's such a good character that you want him to win. You know what I mean? Like, despite all that, because he's like struggling, and not and when you see him succeed or see him like trying his hardest, because like you see the people around him, you seeing how strong, like you seeing how Bakugo's strong, see how Todoroki is, granted those characters get introduced later on, right? But like he's just like a kid that you want to see win. You cheer him on no matter the circumstances, and like his good nature, I don't think it's like a deciment. It's not a
a
demise.
detriment? Yeah, yeah. It
It's
doesn't.
not like a negative me person. Like I don't think him wanting to save Shigaraki is a bad thing or a bad character like trait to have. It's just I think it's really good and it speaks loud for the character
Yeah,
in a
absolutely.
series called My Hero. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah, and that I like that you say that too. That it is my hero, right? So it's like, who is your hero? And
Yeah.
who's Aries' hero? It's my hero is Deku. Who was Koda's hero? My hero is Deku, and all this type of stuff. And it's interesting, I guess, that even the villain needs a hero, which is kind of
Mhm.
interesting,
And
right?
I
Even
love it, man. Like Deku's just he's like I don't want like for I don't want to say pure heart, but like man, he's just he's so like and again not cheerful, but it's just something about him, like just rooting for him.
no, you can't not, right? Because it's like
Yeah.
nothing gets him down, right? What's kind of interesting is, especially if you look at kind of the contrast between the double spread, right? Where it's like you looked like you needed saving, and what do we see here? Like this city is obliterated. Like all of
Yeah.
these people need saving, right? Or like all of this stuff needs saving, and yet he's kind of like one person at a time. It
Yeah.
reminds me of the first scene that we get introduced to All Might, where it's like, oh, he saved 60 people already, and he's like not stopping, right? Like the scene that
Yeah.
makes an impression on Deku. It's that one person at a time and saving everybody, but starting with one person. And
Yep.
you gotta start with the villain in this case, right, to prevent
And,
everything else.
like just final thoughts when it comes to like I really enjoyed the chapter. Like yeah, going back to like saving one person and save them one at a time. But like he's hard on himself. You know what I mean? Like we see him like, yo, Deku, you're doing like good. Like nah, I haven't man. Like he's very hard on himself, like because he wants to be the best, right? So I think that's what also makes him a great character. Where like he's not like, okay, yeah, like I got this. Like no, he's very like headstrong when it comes to that aspect about himself. Where like I'm still like he knows he's still growing. He knows he still needs to get better. He like yes, he says he needs to shave Shigaraki, and like in the demise of this destruction, Deku's like probably hates this like because like man, I couldn't save the people in the city. You know what I mean?
Oh, for sure.
This is definitely gonna hurt his like not ego, but like his like
His mental state and his,
yeah.
yeah, I gotcha. For sure, and I agree with you completely, where you just get hooked on. And the the nature of this chapter and the way it's kind of changed, I guess, our perspective of the villain. It's kind of interesting to see, because you and I have gone back and forth a lot of times, a lot of times actually, on what we think of where we think this ending could go.
Mhm.
And what this has almost brought to light for me is, what if like Shigaraki is the will be the inheritor of One for All and All for One.
Oh wow.
And that's how Deku will save him, because he's like, I have to give you these quirks because I can't do it. Because
I
like,
I don't know about that. I mean,
well, the way I can almost see it going down kind of now is, and I'm just spitballing a little bit here, is like All for One, somehow separates himself. He's got all these quirks. Shigaraki's left, kind of like screwed over, but he's the only person left. And then Deku like bestows to him, you know, uh, One for All. And then he becomes, the next thing in order to save him. Deku does that sort of thing. But, just throwing out some thoughts.
yeah,
Um,
that's weird. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see.
Well, come on, yeah, look at Kylo Ren in Star Wars Episode 9. He becomes a Jedi. He becomes good and
Yeah. Well, but
there.
I guess we have to see Deku become the number one hero.
We
That's the
do,
thing.
but nobody says he has to live once he becomes it. So
Good
you never
point.
know. Anyway, the only other thing I want to mention is I think there's some really interesting resonance between the theme of this chapter and the newest volume cover, where we see Bakugo on the front, but he's in his hero attire. But it's a callback to that moment where he falls in the river as a child, and Deku runs down to pick him up. I think it's very interesting that we're seeing that play out in this chapter, but with a different character kind of thing. I thought that was really interesting. I don't know if it just happened to work out from a chapter's perspective and a volume's perspective, but I thought that was really cool.
Okay, I definitely agree. Yeah, for sure. But I think that's all we can talk about. We had like a long this one.
Yeah, definitely for sure. So check in for more content as always at the console room. Stay tuned because this week we're going to be starting our Halo Master Chief collection run through. So check that out. We'll definitely make sure to get those up pretty consistently. And always, thanks for checking in. Thanks for listening.
Yep, and have a good one.